Madam Speaker, and as we know that response from the Northern Territory Government into the coronial into domestic violence has been tabled today in this parliament, and we've heard from a number of speakers deemed tabling Member for Johnston today. We've heard from a number of speakers, including the Minister for Prevention of Domestic Violence, who is taking carriage of the response from a whole-of-government perspective. I want to acknowledge those 4 women who were at the centre of this inquest: Ms Yunupiŋu, Ragurrk, Rubuntja and Boothby Haywood. And I recognise the pain and strength of their families and communities. These deaths were brutal, they were preventable. And as the coroner said, these deaths were senseless and shocking. And she went on to say, "We are complicit if we don't act now." And that is exactly what we are doing. We are acting. The Northern Territory has the highest rates of domestic and family violence in the country. The system, over many years, has failed too many. Madam Speaker, the coroner's job is to examine the truth, expose systemic failings and recommend reform. Not every recommendation will be straightforward to implement, but of course every life lost must drive action. The coroner's report is powerful, but some proposals go beyond what is practical or affordable in the real world. But the CLP government is committed to reform that is grounded in outcomes rather than outrage. The whole of government response is being led by the Minister for Prevention of Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence, Minister 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑𝘼𝙔𝙍𝙏, and I want to acknowledge her strong leadership and deep commitment to victim-focused change. As Attorney-General, my role is focused on the justice system, the courts, the laws, the legal protections for victims. Minister 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙗 and I work closely to ensure the system responds and reforms. Madam Speaker, I received the coroner's report in November 2024 and triggered the formal process required under the Coroner's Act. I wrote to agency CEOs in January 2025, requesting responses within 3 months as required by law. A coordinated whole-of-government response, led by the Department of Children and Families, was delivered in April. That response is being tabled in Parliament today and, of course, will be returned to the coroner. Madam Speaker, I want to acknowledge in the chamber Rachel from YWCA, and the reason why I do that today is because I met with her last week and her colleagues who operate a service in Palmerston, and it's services like YWCA who have told us that this is the first time in years that it feels like, and I don't want to paraphrase exactly and paraphrase her wording, but it feels like she's seeing real action. And I think that is a credit to Minister 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙗. And she mentioned that she has met with Minister 𝙍𝙀𝙀𝙗 a number of times, and that she really values the fact that our government has invested that $36 million and committed that money annually and locked in ongoing. We also spoke at length about the challenges where the Commonwealth has actually stepped in, and they had boosted over time the referral and awareness programs, and that more women are speaking up and more women are seeking help and more women are trying to escape, which is good on one hand because we need that to happen, but on the other hand, the same kinds of money is not flowing to the services that are needed as those women and children come through the system and as they are speaking up and as they are trying to escape to somewhere safe. So without that extra funding from the feds, that of course is going to mean that the more people coming through means that people will be turned away, which is an absolute devastated situation to be in. And that's certainly the conversation that I had with the YWCA, and I know that's the conversation the Minister 𝙍𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙗 has had several times with the organisations that support these women. And it's an awful predicament to be in. Madam Speaker, justice system action is already underway, and this is the other part of domestic violence and what is needed to be done. We've backed the specialist DFSV court in Alice Springs, and I note the member for Guadja mentioned that in his speech, that he too backs this. And we support expanding it to Darwin, Katherine and the Bush Courts. We've supported community-led mediation and peacekeeping initiatives in Alice Springs, West Daly and Barkly. We're continuing with the new alternative to custody programs like the Life Skills Camp and the Anandili Wakwas Healing Centre. We're improving the Victims Register and exploring practical ways to strengthen the Victims Charter. With the existing law and justice groups, the 5 of them that are underway, we're funding that to support mediation, education and victim safety on the ground. And if I turn to some of the specific coroner recommendations within the Attorney General's portfolio, like I said, recommendation 17 is expanding the specialist DFSV court, and we support this and will continue working on those scalable models with proper funding and coordination. Recommendations 18 and 19, strengthen culturally informed trauma awareness peacemaking in the community. These models are already underway. Recommendation 20 is the alternatives to custody, and that's support for perpetrators, which must be built on community safety first and meaningful outcomes to drive change. Recommendations 21 and 22, improving victim notification systems and rights compliance, modernising the legal framework and the way services work. And of course, we already passed those laws earlier this year. We expanded the Victims Register. Every action will be anchored in our priority, which is protecting victims as a priority over the perpetrators. Madam Speaker, there is no doubt it's a system in crisis, and it's a budget in crisis also. We talk at length about how we inherited a deeply broken system and, of course, the debt that we inherited from Labor, which, of course, we know is on track to reach $13.97 billion by 28-29. But, Madam Speaker, victims can't wait for that to be resolved, and that's why we're investing in what matters and cutting what doesn't. We won't rubber stamp every idea, but we're investing in what matters. Sorry, we won't rubber stamp every idea, but we will fund what works to keep people safe. Madam Speaker, we will continue to put victims first. Our government was elected to reduce crime, and that's what we're doing. And domestic violence is a crime. And we make no apologies for locking up those violent offenders. We know support and rehabilitation are important and critical, but only after community safety is secured. And when you're in crisis, we have to protect the vulnerable people first. Victims can't wait, communities can't wait, and we won't allow for repeat offenders to walk the streets while victims live in fear. Madam Speaker, 87 women have been killed by domestic partners in the Northern Territory since 2000. And 82 of them were Aboriginal women. The NT has the highest intimate partner homicide rate in the country, 7 times the national average. 63% of assaults in the Territory are domestic violence related, and 40% of those involve weapons. Domestic, family and sexual violence accounts for up to 80% of police time and 60% of DPP matters. This isn't just a legal issue. It's a health crisis, a safety crisis and a crisis of community trust. And it's not just a historical problem, it's a growing one. In 2021-22, there were 2,191 breaches of domestic violence orders and 1,840 of other DV-related criminal charges. That's 4,031 serious cases. In 2022-23, that jumped to 4,948, and it rose again in 23-25. This is a justice system under pressure, with domestic violence perpetrators adding to that pressure. We will put the victims first, and we will deal with the laws and strengthen the laws so that perpetrators of domestic violence are dealt with, while at the same time working through those recommendations, of which, like the Minister for Prevention of Domestic Violence said, we accepted most of them, either in full or in principle, and we are working through that. A lot of the work, Madam Speaker, was already well and truly underway before we've read the report, and the Minister has been really clear in the money that she's committed and the fact that those funding programs will continue until she has a chance to review all of those. Thank you, Madam Speaker.